full-time job is teaching nursing at Loma Linda University, and I'm a lupus thriver. I mostly manage all of my symptoms with lifestyle and with lifestyle measures, especially nutrition and exercise. And so hoping at some point to actually reverse my labs and not show that I have lupus anymore. So just what we're going to talk about, looking at what the blue zones are and how movement and exercise is involved in the blue zones and longevity. And we'll talk about some stuff that you could actually apply today. So the blue zones, I'm so sorry. Some blue zones, they are geographical locations where people live the longest, healthiest lives. And there are five original locations that they found in the world. And you can see them here on the map. The only one in North America is Loma Linda, California, and that's where I live. So they're made famous by Dan Buettner, who is a journalist for National Geographic. He worked with National Geographic on this topic. And I think it's really interesting. The way that they got the name the Blue Zones is that a demographer circled it, the Sardinia Blue Zone. They circled that area with a blue pen, and that's how they got the name Blue Zones, which I just think is really interesting. So how do the longest people in the world move, and how can we do the same? So some just general overall things that pretty much everyone in all the blue zones do. Gardening is a big one. In most of these areas, almost everyone that they talked to and they interviewed and worked with, they had their own gardens, they grew their own food, they went out to their garden, picked their food, brought it in and cooked it. And gardening is such a huge, there's so many good things about gardening. It burns between 200 and 400 calories per hour. You're getting involved, you're working with the soil. They've shown that there's a lot of mood lifting benefits from gardening. It's mood boosting, it helps fight depression. You are getting whole foods that you've created, and so you're automatically going to be eating healthier. Just overall, this is one of the top natural movements that you can do. So gardening is one thing that they have very much in common. Non-sedentary, the people in the blue zones, they don't just sit. They are doing things naturally throughout the day. So natural movements with a purpose, whether it's the job that they have, which we'll talk about, especially with the Sardinian blue zones, household tasks. They talked about, in Sardinia, the women are the ones who run the house, and they'll get up on the roof and they'll fix their roof. They do all of these household tasks. Not using a lot of, one of the things they notice is a lot of these areas where these people are living the longest are because they're keeping up with traditional lifestyles that have happened over hundreds of years. So they're not using a lot of the modern conveniences that we often use today. So it means that they're moving more. A lot of walking, whether it's walking to the store or walking to church or walking to the neighbor's house, there's much more walking involved. And then they spend a lot of time outdoors, which I think, especially now, is kind of an important part of what we can do. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of ways that we can manage this while we're dealing with this pandemic. So in Ikaria, Greece, this is one of the places they make homemade bread. And one of the things, a lot of times too, if you get sourdough bread, you go to your neighbor's house, you get the starter, you come back and you talk for a little while, and then you walk back home, and then you actually make the bread, kneading it yourself, not using the hand mixer. And then walking wherever it is that they're going. And if you notice, you'll notice here in the picture that it's a very hilly place. So they often have to walk different places, and they also go and harvest wild greens from the hills too. So you go out to the hills and harvest your wild greens and bring them back home to cook. So it's just naturally, even just to get your food to eat, you're moving a lot more often. In Sardinia, Italy, this one was really interesting to me. They were doing studies on this area, and they found that the highest correlation, the thing that was most highly correlated with reaching 100 was pastoralism. These are mostly shepherds, whether it's sheep or goats, and these men, they walk, it's usually around 5 miles a day up and down the hills with their sheep. And they were looking at these men who are 10 times more likely to live to 100 than the rest of the men in Italy, even men who had jobs where they were active, like farmers. And they hypothesized that this is in part because the farmers will be overworked during certain times of the year, which can cause inflammation. Whereas the pastoralists or these shepherds, it's every day walking a slow 5 miles up and down the hills with the sheep. And interestingly, the second most highly correlated thing with being with reaching age 100 was the hilliness of the terrain and how far one walked to work. So the steeper the terrain, the longer they tended to live. Whether it was because everywhere they walked within their town, they were going up and down hills, which I thought was very interesting. Very highly correlated, walking up and down hills, which makes sense in Loma Linda. I very much dislike riding my bike around Loma Linda because there are just hills everywhere. It's a very hilly town. So that would make sense with that as well. Okinawa, Japan, in all of the places they walk almost, or it's not a lot, or they were riding bikes, it's as with in Costa Rica, riding bikes. So again, that happens in Okinawa. One of the things that stands out with Okinawa, Japan is that a lot of the people sit on the ground. So they don't have couches. So when you are entering into their house and you see they have mats on the floor where you sit on the ground, and they're getting up and down very often. And that getting up and down strengthens the hips, strengthens the legs. It helps with balance, so you're less likely to have falls as you age. And there's also having to do with the strength of your muscles getting up and down without necessarily using your hands, and having a good squatting position really strengthens everything. So something that I didn't even think about, that sitting on the couch instead of sitting on the ground could make a big difference in how much I'm moving throughout the day. In Nicoya, Costa Rica, this is another one of the blue zones. When they talk about the one lady that they visit very often, she's like hacking down a lot of the garden or the jungle that's kind of around her house for more garden space, or she's sweeping her floor. Just always, every time they show up, she's doing something really active. So they do have to clear out some of the jungle to make their gardens. They again have gardens, grinding the corn to make the tortillas. Everything is very rudimentary in as far as what they have to do to live their lives. And so they're actually doing a lot more movement just in living life in general.
And exertion, so much exertion in the movement.
Yes. Yes.
It's like steep hills, hacking, jungle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Loma Linda is, like I said, it's hilly. I don't think that we have a lot of people who necessarily walk to the grocery store as often, but one of the things that we talked about before is that religion and health are very closely tied together and interconnected in Loma Linda. So Loma Linda has a very high population of Seventh-day Adventists, and a lot of the centenarians there are Seventh-day Adventists, and that health and religion tie very closely together. And one of the things that we will talk about later on in another session is the Sabbath and having a day that's set apart. And one of the things that's really emphasized is you go outside, you go to nature, outdoors, and doing walks and hikes together on Sabbath afternoons. And getting out into nature is a very big part of it's very big part of Adventism, at least culturally, that you get outside and you interact with nature, and that's how you connect with God. So getting out and walking out is a really big thing for this area. Currently, we have something called Loma Linda Lopers, and it's a wide range of people. Some people walk, some people run, but there's on Sunday mornings, there are all these people out in their bright hot pink shirts moving around in Loma Linda. It's kind of fun. Interestingly, Loma Linda, so the woman that you see here, she was the only person of all of the people that Dan Buettner interviewed who did any kind of like what we would think of as exercise. You know, we think of exercise as lifting weights or running or, you know, different things that we consider exercise, HIIT training or circuit training. I'm trying to CrossFit, the other thing we think
sports.
of. Yeah, sports. She was the only one who did any kind of what we would traditionally think of as exercise. So she would get on a stationary bike for 20 minutes and then she would do these weights that she would lift in the mornings. But none of the other ones did. No one else really did. I know Dr. Wareham was the other one that was specifically mentioned in the books and many of the documentaries that were made from the Blue Zones that Dan Buettner did. When he first met him, he was building a fence. So it's more of that functional movement of actually exerting things throughout the day. She was the only one who actually did any kind of exercise, which I thought was interesting. What we traditionally think of exercise. Yes, exactly. And the Loma Linda Blue Zone is the only one in North America, and it's the only one that exists within a very industrialized space. A lot of the other ones, it's traditional life that has just extended into this, you know, into their current days. A lot of times because they are very isolated. Whereas Loma Linda is very different in that sense. Loma Linda is not super isolated. It kind of is its own little bubble, but it has a major freeway running right through it. It's a very industrialized area. So kind of an interesting difference between the two, that they do have some of those more like Americanized ideas of exercise. This is the same slide that I showed last time, and it just kind of showed these are all different lifestyle mnemonics that have been created by Adventists, and you'll notice that they include a variety of things, but exercise or activity is one of them. So in this one is creation, is activity is one of them, as opposed to specifically saying exercise. So let's talk about exercise. Of course, we obviously have exercise as we think of it, as like we talked about all of those different things, having like sports and CrossFit and weight training, etc. I thought it was very interesting where we got this idea of 10,000 steps a day. So, you know, we have been told, count your steps and get 10,000 steps a day, and that's one way that you can make sure you're moving around enough. And where this came from is actually from the Amish communities in North America. So our Amish communities, they have the lowest rates of obesity of any major community in North America. And they looked at their steps per day, and the men averaged about 18,000 steps a day, the women 14,000 steps a day, because they live in a very traditional way. So they're doing a lot more of those movements and activities that we would normally do hundreds of years ago that are not aided by all of our fancy technology. And even on their rest day, they would average about 10,000 steps a day on their rest day, which I told that to my sister, and she said, so basically we are just trying to meet their minimum. And a lot of people do, they struggle to get those 10,000 steps, and that's their minimum on their rest day. I thought that was interesting. That's where we get it from.
Yeah, the Amish, they don't have cars, right? They have horse and buggy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so probably a lot more walking too in that case.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes energy and movement to actually hook up a horse to a buggy as well. That's a lot more movement than just getting into a car. So that's one way that we can kind of increase as far as exercise goes. The other thing that the guidelines for adults from the United States, I'm now blanking on who it is that actually put this out, this from our United States government. They suggest 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week. And this is talk but not sing. So intensity where you're going and you can carry on a conversation with somebody, but you're not able to sing a song. And that's basically, that tells you where you are. And it's usually between 40 and 60% of your max heart rate. 150 minutes per week is the minimum. If you double that and do 300, you double the positive benefits. So things like this would be walking, hiking. It's very much like the list activities. So 300 minutes per week, it's about 5 hours per week of this moderate intensity activity. So these would be things like the list activities, the low intensity steady state activities. And this is something that's been around for years. It kind of got lost because we had HIIT come in, which is the high intensity interval training, where you push really, really, really hard, and then you rest, and then you push really, really hard, and then you rest. And that's become huge in the past several years. LISS was old news, and now it's starting to come back because we recognize, kind of like we hypothesized with those farmers in Italy, that you can overwork your body and cause a lot of inflammation. And there has to be a balance there. In some cases, it's good to push your body a little bit, but for longevity, it's actually, we don't want to overstress our body too much. So this low intensity steady state is lower intensity exercises like walking, hiking, cycling, swimming, something where you're just keeping a steady state of intensity. And one person mentioned how this is not where you walk your dog if your dog is someone who just stops and sniffs at every little thing, because then you're going and stopping and going and stopping. This is a steady state. So you want to have a steady state where you're able to talk but not sing, and keep that up for at least 30 minutes, if not an hour. So these are suggestions that for exercise that are not exercises that are going to cause you to put any added stress on your body. Not that those exercises are wholly bad in and of themselves, but we need to have some kind of a balance. High intensity might be good for cardiac and keeping up your cardiac health, and maybe, if you're wanting to see actual physical benefits or physical changes in your body, maybe you might need to do some of those things. But it's not the end all be all. That we really do have to think about these types of things, and that this low intensity steady state or lower intensity exercises actually might be better for longevity of your body, and you're not wearing it down, especially when we think about running and how that affects our joints. Also thinking about, there are some people who are not going to be able to go out and do HIIT training because you have to start somewhere, and these activities might be activities that people can really start out with. Having said that, this is all, I think, what we would kind of consider exercise. But there's this whole thing, the people in the blue zones don't exercise. They don't go out and say, okay, I'm going on my walk now, and go out for an hour walk and then come back and live the rest of their lives. It's functional movement throughout the day as a part of just living life. And that's one thing with our world today, I think, especially now that a lot of us are working from home, that we sit in front of a computer and we do all our work sitting in front of a computer. And we have all of these great technological advances to keep us from having to do anything. If I even just making bread, I don't have to hand knead it. I can put it in a hand mixer and it does all, or a stand mixer, it does all the work for me. They even have little mechanisms that you can put in your pan that will stir what you're making for you. So you don't even have to stir as you're cooking. We have ride mowers, or you hire somebody to do your lawn. There's so many different things that we do that allow us to just sit and not have to move. And that's one thing that what we want to do is deconvenience ourselves a little bit so that we're forced to move more. And, you know, natural bursts of activity every 20 minutes if you're normally sedentary. One of the things they talk about is NEAT scores, which is kind of interesting. And now I'm going to forget what it all stands for. It's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And so what this is any activity that is not any activity that is not sleeping or exercise-like activity. So when you're doing exercise or sport-like activities, that doesn't count. When you're sleeping, that doesn't count. But any kind of movement like fidgeting is one of those things that can increase your NEAT score. If you are someone who has to walk while they're on the phone, that increases your NEAT score. I know my brother is someone who is always playing with something, whether it's he's flipping a pen, or if he's pressing the windows in the car up and down, or he's just tapping his foot constantly, he would have a high NEAT score. And those people just in general, they move around more and they're going to expend more energy throughout the day. So we want to try and find ways to increase our NEAT scores, to increase our movement throughout the day. One of the things they talk about is maybe having, just kind of move around. One of the things they talk about is having a standing desk. I know for myself, when I started working from home and doing online teaching, I was just sitting at my table all the time because I was teaching while I was sitting. I was grading videos while I was sitting, and I was just staring at my computer for hours and hours and hours. I don't have a standing desk, but I found I have like a buffet kind of thing, or if you have a counter that I just started setting up there, and just standing maybe isn't enough to really get yourself moving. But I did notice that when I stood at my makeshift standing desk, I moved a lot more than when I was sitting. I would, shift my weight, I'd stretch my leg out, I'd walk in place. Just naturally, I was moving much more while standing. So that's one way you can do that, is find a way to stand while you're doing your stuff on your computer. I know Dr. Greger he's someone in the plant-based world, and he does all of his interviews on a treadmill. So he puts his camera up above the treadmill and he walks for all of his interviews, which I think is great. They even have walking desks where you can have a treadmill underneath and it just goes at a really slow pace, so you can be walking while you're standing. I'm sure those are very expensive. Things that I kind of picked up on when I was starting to get tired of looking at the computer, I would go outside and throw the ball with my dog. My dog loves to play fetch. So I'd go outside and play fetch for 5 minutes. That's one way that's really good to just kind of get yourself out of the environment that you're in and get outside and do a little bit of movement. Do you guys have ideas of what other things you can do to just get moving throughout the day?
So it'd be like getting up. So if you are seated, you're getting up more often, like getting up every 20, 25 minutes. You could do stretching or some kind of, breath of fire, yoga breath, or some kind of change in posture, and you can cook. You can take out the garbage more often.
That's a good call.
Yeah, when you're on the telephone, you can walk up and down as you're talking on the telephone. Usually I just sit down and talk, but when you talked about the 10,000 steps, I actually do 12,000 a day. And so sometimes I'm not able to get out, and so I'm in, and I still am determined to get my 12,000 in. And so if I'm on the phone, I'll walk up and down, or I'll march in place just to get those 12,000 in. Or if I'm watching the TV, instead of sitting down and watching it, I'll just be marching in place.
Yeah.
but I'm determined to get those steps in.
That's so good. I remember you saying that.
And just like you said, like chopping vegetables, cooking, like the more your time you're spending with your food prep, the more you're moving. Of course, taking stairs instead of elevators whenever you're outside, walking instead of driving, all those things that maybe people do think about. But yeah, like changing your location, right? Like just like getting out of your house and going back inside and like going into the garden and then going back inside and just like keeping yourself kind of like physically busier.
Yeah.
One question, Chelsea. In terms of that list that you were talking about, does dancing fall into that category as well?
It depends on how vigorous your dancing is, I suppose.
Oh, okay.
The idea is that you want to be able to talk but not sing.
Yeah.
So
okay.
as long as if you're steadily moving and keeping your heart rate, being at the point where you could talk but not sing, then yes. I know some people who they dance so much that they can't breathe at the end of it. That would be not quite low intensity steady state. But dancing is that's a great way to just move naturally, right? Cleaning your house. I was thinking of this because last time I was cleaning my house, I ended up dancing more than cleaning because I put on my music to clean with, and then didn't get much cleaning done. But yeah, dancing is great. I think that's so much fun.
It is.
I tend to enjoy dancing by myself more than dancing with anybody else. I'm not a good dancer at all.
And the nice thing is that even if it doesn't contribute to the list, then it contributes to the NEAT. So
yes.
Okay.
Any movement is good, right?
Yeah. Any movement that you're doing is positive movement. I know one thing that I've kind of said to myself in the past is sleep is always productive. And so I've given myself like leave to take naps when I need them or to go to bed early, even if whatever. And so I realized that with movement too, like there is no bad movement, and I'm not going to be upset at myself if I don't have the energy or the time to exercise. As long as I'm moving, that is the important thing. And I know like sometimes I felt really guilty about like, I really don't want to go running. I just want to take a walk. I just want to walk with my dog. I don't want to go for a run. And to be able to give myself the permission to be like, no, this is still really good. Even if I'm not running, which the world kind of tells me that that's the thing I should be doing, walking is really good. And it's good for my mind as well as good for my soul. And it's good for my body. It's much less stress on my body. So kind of giving yourself permission to do any movement is good movement. It's productive.
Yeah, I guess like it gets in the harmful or potentially harmful territory if you're doing repetitive movement that is causing pain, or if you're exercising wrong, or if you're injured and you're pushing through something, or even if you're exhausted and pushing through, like then I think movement can go into being inflammatory as opposed to, but you're talking about more holding back. If you feel like doing something less strenuous, then
yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good point to make, that there are times when we really do have to back off and not push ourselves so hard or make ourselves feel so guilty for not doing this thing that we think is the best thing to do. Because the people in the blue zones, the longest living people in the world, they don't exercise. It's about movement. So finding ways to do that. One thing that I did, sorry, Dr. Millie, did you want to say something?
No, I was just still thinking about the fact that that a shepherd is 10 times more likely to live till 100 than any other Italian man.
Yeah.
That's amazing, because that's an outdoor life, I imagine.
I did have a question. In terms of, like you said, exercise versus just activity and just natural movement, then how do I pose this question? Like for someone that's overweight, or do they have overweight people in the blue zone? I mean,
not
if
as many.
Not long. I doubt if there's many overweight people. So I guess they don't really have to worry about that. But for someone like myself, how would you correlate just that like minimal type of movement versus the exercise to lose weight then?
So that's actually a really good question. A few things. One is there are lots of different ways that we approach weight loss, and probably thousands of different ways people approach weight loss. But a lot of times what it comes down to, bottom line, is, are we putting out more calories than we're taking in? And one way to do that is to move. And things like the Mayo Clinic looked at simple movements like standing, walking, and talking can burn an additional 300 calories a day. So not getting into counting calories, I don't know that that's healthy for everybody. It might work for some people, but for a lot of people, it doesn't work really well. But without counting calories, you can still add on calories that you burn every day just by doing simple movements. So any type, those movements that you're doing are burning calories, even if it's not strictly exercise. Additionally, if you're looking at, LISS, this low intensity steady state, actually can be very helpful for breaking down and metabolizing fat in your body. Things like HIIT, or the high intensity, it does help you burn fat even after you've stopped working out. But the LISS can help you actually metabolize that fat and break it down. So a lot of times people say you maybe need to do both. Having said that, some people who are overweight or are not physically active, they're not going to be able to jump in and do HIIT exercises, those high intensity intervals, because that's just really hard on your body. So something like LISS, where you're walking, it helps break down fat because you have to have oxygen to break down fat, and turn it into energy. And things like this, you have a lot more oxygen available to your body while you're walking or doing something that's low intensity. So it's going to help break down fat even better. And then it's something that it's not high impact, so it's not as hard on your joints. So things like walking are actually is a really good thing for losing weight. And it's a really good place to start, especially. And then if you get up to even if people who can't even walk yet, doing movements, just getting up and moving around in the house more, then leading up to doing longer walks, and maybe walking to the grocery store, and then you're carrying stuff back with you, all of that will increase your calories that are burned, so that helps lose weight. But then it also helps build some of that muscle mass, and it helps strengthen your bones. Walking is great we have to do some kind of, you have to do something like walking to build up your bones, because you have to have that weight on them. So things like that can help keeping your bones built up over time. Even if you're not gaining muscle mass like we think of as muscle mass of these people who are really buff, you are still working your muscles, you're keeping your bone density up. And
that's
if you can walk outside,
because a lot of people think weight bearing means lifting weights, but weight bearing means carrying your own weight. Pounding your bones.
That was going to be my next question. When you talk about osteo, they always tell you get some ham weight to sort of do some weight bearing exercise. So that was actually going to be what I was going to bring up next.
Yeah, but that's because you're making your body heavier, and then you're stomping your feet on the ground. I mean, building muscle mass is great for your bones. It protects them, makes you more agile and physical and less likely to fall and less likely to hurt yourself and all that. But weight bearing is really pounding your body parts on the pavement too. So you are essentially stimulating your bone cells to reproduce. So, and you're touching on all the myths too, because the other myth is that, of course, that you have to, no pain, no gain, that you have to over exercise in order to burn more calories so that you can lose more weight. But no, you have to exercise within a heart rate of 100 and 130 so that you can still continue to talk. And then that's how you burn fat as you continue your movement past 20 minutes, and you don't burn sugar like you do when you're working on your endurance. And gradually over time, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with burning sugar, but really you're just burning the sugar that's available in your blood. You're not accessing fat cells that are stored, which is really what you want to do when you're losing weight. So building that intensity, even if it's like a 10-minute walk, and then the next day you'll be able to, at the same heart rate, with the same, ease of breath, be able to do 15 minutes, and the next day 20 minutes, and the next day 30 minutes, and then you'll be able to go faster. And your heart rate will always keep up with you because you're building on your endurance. When you start, you get winded so fast, but then after you've been doing it for a year, you can go so much faster and not be winded. So
yeah. And as you are able to increase the amount of time that you're doing it, your body gets more efficient at burning fat for as fuel as well. That's one of the things that they tell with endurance athletes, which not super great for overall long-term health. These endurance athletes who do like ultra marathons, or my brother's doing an Ironman in September. But they become very efficient at burning fat for fuel because they're doing those super long times. It's an endurance thing where the longer you're going, the more you're going to have to use fat as fuel. So if you can kind of do that lower intensity for a longer period of time, not everybody's been able to do an hour and a half or whatever it is a day walking, but getting it past, like Dr. Miller said, past that 20 minutes, so at least 30 minutes to 45 minutes is great. Another interesting thing, even if you're not necessarily up and walking, having houseplants. If you get houseplants and put them out throughout your house, watering houseplants burns the same number of calories as stretching and walking, which I was surprised at. So if you can get houseplants and put them out throughout your house, it helps purify the air in your house. You're actually caring for something that grows, so it can give you some satisfaction, as long as you don't kill them like I tend to do. So yeah, I don't do well with houseplants. But then just walking around watering them is another source of activity.
I guess that's why I feel lazy sometimes about watering my plants. It's like, why do I feel lazy about watering my plants? Because it burns calories.
It does.
It takes energy.
It does take energy.
I love my plants. I love you all.
Yeah, you have to talk to them. I remember when I was very young, we did that whole experiment of playing music for the house plants, and the ones that had the nice music grew better than the ones who had the heavy metal music. And so then I learned, like, I need to talk to my plants. And so I appreciate that you did that. You told your house plants that you love them all.
Yes, even though they're probably a little thirsty right now. But that was also an amazing tidbit that gardening burns so many calories. I didn't realize that gardening burns like 300, 400 calories an hour. But it makes sense because you're digging and you're walking, and you're crouching and you're moving, and yeah. And it's also just so satisfying emotionally.
Yeah, it's huge. They did some studies about with mental health patients, even inpatient ones, and doing gardening as treatment, and it was an amazing treatment for them. Yeah. So and the other thing that, talking about just activities, ways that we can do this. One of the big things is getting outside. So a lot of the blue zones, they live outdoors as well, because not just with the gardening, but just a lot of stuff that they do is moving around and interacting with the environment, which I think during our pandemic, especially where people are trapped inside, that getting out and moving is so important. One, because you're less likely to catch the virus from somebody when you're all outside, because the air isn't concentrated. If you have virus, it disperses very quickly. But also vitamin D. We are seeing a lot more research about vitamin D coming out, and that it helps with your immune system. That having the right vitamin D levels helps protect you from getting sick, or even if you do get sick, helps you from going into that cytokine storm. But vitamin D is so important for so many other things that happen in our body, that we really need to be able to get outside and get some sunshine to get that vitamin D to help protect us. So another reason to get outside and really exercise, not exercise, move outside. Even if it's just going out and, for me, playing fetch with my dog for a little bit, or going for long walks. So that's a really important thing. So some tips that we can kind of apply even today, just getting outside in general, you're more likely to just move around if you can get outside. Now, some people are not in places where it's healthy to, or I'm sorry, where it's safe to walk outside, and that can be a problem. So sometimes it means you have to drive somewhere potentially where you could be safe to be outside, or finding ways to maybe going on a patio and doing some exercises on the patio, like movements like dancing on the patio to just get some movement in outside. Walking with friends, I know that one of the things specifically they talked about, even on the Blue Zones website, they had a whole article about how to move during the pandemic. So, if you have friends who you can walk, be 6 feet away from as you're walking, that you can still go outside, and you're much less likely to transmit the virus that way. I have a Fitbit, and it reminds me, and it probably will remind me soon here, that to move every hour. So if I haven't taken 250 steps in an hour, it'll remind me 10 till that I need to get up and move. So having an alarm set on your phone or your watch to kind of remind you to move, making bread without a mixer, actually kneading your bread. We talked about walking around the house while you're talking on the phone, and doing something fun, because we need to find enjoyment in what we're doing. So that is a huge part of it. They mentioned, if you wanted to join a virtual club, which, hey, this is a virtual club where you can encourage people to move and go walking outside, or tracking movement throughout the day. Finding a bike trail if you like riding your bike, but getting 30 minutes to an hour outside moving is the best. And if you can't be outside, then moving inside is also great, and just supplement with vitamin D. One of the things that I'm going to go on here. One of the things that Dan Buettner says is he hates when people break down the Blue Zones into diet and exercise. He said that's not it. That's not sustainable. Like, that's exactly what this is not. That these people in these zones they live as long as they do because they don't diet and exercise. That they just live lives that encourage them that makes this healthier choices easier and the unhealthy choices harder. And so finding ways to do that in your own house, in your own life. So one of the things they have on the Blue Zones website is checklists that you can go in, and you can see how healthy your life is, or how your house is set up to best support you in being healthy. And he talks about deconveniencing your house. So some things are, don't have a TV remote. Take the batteries out of your TV remote, and when you just change the channel, you go and you actually physically change it. Another one, which I don't think I would use, is turning off your garage door opener. So you actually have to go and physically open and close your garage door. That might not be a safe thing for some people, depending on where you live, or maybe you don't even have a car where you live, and so you have to find the equivalent. So I know you guys are in New York, and so finding something equivalent to that, just finding ways to deconvenience your life a little bit so that it just makes it easier to make that choice to move. So he has a lot of suggestions. They have a lot of suggestions on the Blue Zones website once you fill out the checklist to kind of do stuff like that. So I would encourage you guys to go check out the website and go through the checklist and see if there are things that you can do to just help you make that healthier choice a little bit easier. And then as far as in your communities, I think we have the opportunity to really influence the people around us. And if we can find ways to encourage outdoor activities and fun things to do outside within our circles, This picture is of a Sabbath afternoon hike with some of my friends in Loma Linda, where we took out all the dogs and went for a walk. So ways to do that. And especially if you're walking through a neighborhood and you get to wave at your friends and then or at your neighbors, and that helps build relationships, which is another huge part of the Blue Zones that we're going to talk about in a future session. So I want to encourage you guys to do that. I have some resources here if anyone wants to look at them. And follow up from last time. I don't know if anybody looked at their challenges from last time, but I want to encourage you to continue to do those ones too. Sharing a healthy meal with friends or family, even if it's virtually, to do that. And even if you're doing walks with each other virtually, that you would, get on the phone with somebody and take a walk with them on the phone, or however we need to do it while we're still trying to be careful about the coronavirus.
I haven't revisited the kitchen checklist, but I didn't score as high as I expected to score. I had too many convenient items
Me too.
in my kitchen. So yeah, that's a really interesting list, the kitchen checklist. If you want to realize how unlikely you are to live till 100, so you can make some changes, because I actually really do want to live till 100. So I want to inconvenience myself as much as possible so that I can live till 100. I need some more exertion, some more hills in my life. I think some more garage doors to be opened.
Yeah, these are good things. Make sure it's fun. That's my thing.
Thanks so much, Chelsea. That was great.
Yeah. Thank you.
I love this topic. It's we're obviously ahead of the times, but other people are going to catch up. And I think these tips are just amazing. And it's just so fun to kind of gather that knowledge from how people are living in the world and in little known areas, really. I mean, it's not known that people don't know what the blue zones are, know that, how healthy these people are and why. And so every time you present, I'm just so enlightened and excited about what makes somebody healthy. And even as you were talking today about Loma Linda, like it being urban, actually. So it's in California, obviously on the West Coast. I mean, there's pollution. We're in America. It's not like we're living in the jungle like in Costa Rica. I would expect people, okay, yeah, they're having clean air all the time, or even in Okinawa or Japan. And so that's really interesting, because we can blame pollution for inflammation and oxidative stress, and yet still people are living till they're 100 and more there. So we can compensate for all of these factors. Like the body is always adapting and changing. And so your presentation brings that out. So I love that message as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so we'll see you next month or in the next couple of months for our next presentation. And in terms of Health Club, next week we've got community coaching, and then the following week after that we've got Ivy Brannon. She'll be talking about sleep and exercise. Then Dr. Selassie will be back. So we're posting July events. We've got Celine Ng as well at the end of July, and I'll be talking about charting at some point as well. So definitely check the listings and come out to as many events as you can. Listen on replay. Congratulations to everybody who finished their detox. Delia, did you finish strong?
Yes, I did.
All right.
I did the soft flush, and mine's worked a half an hour after I did it.
Okay. Well, did it feel satisfying?
Excuse me?
Did it feel satisfying? Was it amazing?
I gotta tell you, drinking that salt water was.
It's hard. It's hard. I did it 2 days.
It was hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a commitment. But if you're fasting and then drinking salt flush, and then you get to experience the entire colonic through the body, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So congratulations, your first 2-week detox.
Thanks.
That's amazing. All vegetarian, all plant-based, creating your own meals. You did 7 days of brown rice diet, vegetables and fruit, then 3 days of mono diet, 3 days of the master cleanser. And then did you come off gradually with fresh juice and vegetables?
I didn't have any fresh juice, so I still had some of my master cleanse left.
Yeah.
So I just drank that.
Okay. Sounds
Yeah.
Oh,
You
whoops, I just
muted
became
again.
you.
There you go.
We'll do it again in the fall. And so I'll be posting leading up to that event too, for anybody who wants to join us in October.
Okay.
Okay. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining,
Chelsea.
Carla. Thanks so much,
Bye-bye.
Chelsea. Good night.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Bye.
Bye.